Hi, this is Bob from Hobby Concepts, and today I'm going to build this Volvo Globetrotter 420. This is an older Tamiya kit. In my preview for the year video, this is one I said I was going to build, and I was fascinated to build it because I've never built one, and because it's the least expensive Tamiya kit, I thought it would be kind of a neat one to showcase. I don't know why it's not more popular, but I think this butterscotch paint job on the box has probably got something to do with it. So I did a little bit better paint job. I added some lights to it, and it was truly fun to build. Cute little truck, steers super sharp, of course being so short. Great yard truck. Yeah, it's fun to build, and this one is basically stock. We'll go through it. Let's get started. So we'll take a look at this little Globetrotter 420. As I mentioned, great little kit. I'm surprised it's not a better seller, but I think it's because of the lousy box art. Okay, so it's got the traditional old style Tamiya packing. All the hardware, tires and everything are in one box. Body parts. I'm going to go ahead and pull this all out of the box and we'll talk about it. Well, I had a chance to kind of lay out the parts and take a look at them. The first thing is this cute little frame. It's really short, 15¼ inches long. This thing's going to steer really good. Of course, with a single rear axle, it's going to be a kind of a neat little truck. A couple things to note. First off, the windows are heavily tinted. That's going to make it really hard to see the interior, which in some ways is good. You don't have to do a fantastic job on the interior, but it will be hard to look in there, especially if it's not lit. Now, the parts bagging is typical Tamiya, nothing exciting there. The transmission bag is pretty much all in one bag. The rear axle bag is pretty much in one bag. I opened the screw bags and dumped them in a muffin tin like I usually do. And dumped some of the additional parts bags into a little bread pan. The paint job is where I really want to try to do something a little different. And so just looking at the way the body is divided, this is for example, the front fender right here, is I thought I would paint the aero parts, the front bumper, this fender, all one color, and then I would paint the top cap one color and the body a separate color. That way I can do a two-color paint job with virtually no masking. There'll be a little tiny bit of masking on this aero piece right here. So I'm going to paint the aero and the top one color, the body another color, give me a nice two-color paint job without a lot of masking. And I'm thinking red and maybe some kind of silver in here. So I'll play around with that and start painting. The parts, of course, are very nice, typical Tamiya. There's the body. Even though it's an older kit, it's nicely molded. Looks really good. The grille is fabulous. Kind of that old school truck look. I really like this. So anyway, I'll play around with painting some things, and I've decided I'm going to also paint the transmission housing to match the lower aero parts. So I will build the transmission, build the rear end, and put the tires and wheels together, as those things are the same on virtually every single Tamiya truck. And then when I get to the frame, we'll start looking at putting the frame together, since it has a single rear axle that's a little different. So I'm just prepping the side frames here. I mounted the shock mounts and the uprights. Assembled this rear bumper piece. It's just 2 screws. Mounted the air tank on this cross member. This cross member here, I just thought I'd show this real quick. They have this nut that's got a little grip on it, and it mounts, we tweezers here. It mounts on this side, and then they show running a bolt through it, which I will do. And the bolt has a washer on it. And what they want you to do is tighten this down to suck the nut into the plastic, and then take it back out. And that leaves a nut in this cross member, which will be used later in the suspension. So this will prep all my little cross members in my rear. Set this one in. Pull it out. Okay, so now all the cross members are prepped. This cross member actually has a space for a nut to fit in here on each side, a lock nut. And so again, you have to remember to do this before you put the frame together. Okay, so that one's ready. So now I can go ahead and slide all my cross members in place and my rear axle in place and get my my frame put together. Now you can see here I mounted my steering servo. I've got, let me just plug this in here and see how we're working. That all looks good. So now the next steps in the instructions are to mount the rear spring hangers, put the shocks together, mount the two front shocks, build the front axle, which is the same as every other truck. So I'll go ahead and mount those things, build the axle, and then we'll install that. So I built the front suspension and it's ready to put on. Completely stock, except I do what I usually do on the Euro trucks and ground away a little bit of this outer area here so it steers a little sharper. No big deal. So now this just mounts on the brackets with a shoulder bolt on each side. And then same thing at the back end here. These just flip around and a shoulder bolt goes through here. And then another shoulder bolt goes through the shock support down here. So I'll put the other one on the other side, I'll put the nuts on them, and that'll get that front suspension all done. And then there's a steering arm, a short one, that's going to connect between these 2 points right here. So we'll go ahead and get that done. So now the rear axle and suspension, of course, is different than most Tamiya trucks because there's only one rear axle. So to start out with, I've got my bump stops, which are interestingly on the opposite side of the frame. Okay, that's a weird one, but I triple checked the instructions and you can see the bump stops down here. So, okay, that's what we're going to do. Now, the suspension is also hooked directly to the axle since there's only one spring. So it's pretty straightforward. This little bracket mounts on here. A couple of these long 3mm bolts drop through. There's a spring spacer here. And the spring has got holes in it. Just drops over that. A little bit of Loctite here. There's a nut retainer. And then the nut. Really pretty straightforward. That's all there is to it. And then on the back end, a couple of these spring shackles mount with a shoulder bolt. So that's the entire rear end and suspension. Now, as far as mounting it, flip this upside down. It's going to mount something like this, and it uses an interesting piece you don't see in other Tamiya kits, and that's this piece right here. It's kind of a shoulder that goes through the spring and then mounts against the frame. Let me get those parts set up and we'll mount this. So here's this rear axle spacer mount. There's a washer that fits over here, and this just goes through the axle. Uses a 3mm bolt, another washer, and then this screws right into, remember we put a capture nut inside this cross member, and that holds this bolt. Very straightforward. And then that gives us our rear mounting position. Now the rear part we put on. The rear ends of the springs mount up in this hole right here, and I had to turn this screw around in order for the head to clear the suspension. So you can see this side here where it's installed with the head turned around. So similar to the front, it uses one of these funky spacers that goes through here. There's a plastic spacer that mounts on that. Fits through the spring retainer. Bolt goes through here into the mounting hole. And then it uses a lock nut. And there's a capture area on the back side for the lock nut, so you don't have to hold it with a wrench. And that just tightens down. Now there's our suspension. I will go ahead and we'll look at the shocks. Okay, so the shock just has a shock spacer in this long bolt, and it runs through this hole down here. And remember, we put a press nut in there earlier and then tightened it down. If you ever wondered what these holes in the back bumper are for, it's so that you can get your screwdriver up there to the head of that. Tamiya does think of everything, don't they? So that just mounts here in the press nut. Spacer goes there. And a bolt and a washer that holds it. And that is the shock mounts. There's our rear suspension. Starting to look like a truck. It's so cute. It's so short. So there's my transmission that I built earlier. Has a 35 turn motor that I had left over from another project, so a little bit better motor than the stock motor that comes in the kit. The drive shaft is there's a little grease here. Slide that into place. And then we'll just mount this down, put a little Loctite on that, and mount it down, and that'll give us our chassis. So you can see on my little chassis I mounted the coupler and the coupler release. I painted this with some clear flat just to knock down the shine. One thing I always like to do is test my drive line with a D battery to make sure everything operates freely, and it does. So that's good to go. So now the next step in the instructions is the battery box. Now I put it together. It's just this little cap here and this battery holder, and it mounts underneath the chassis like this. Right here, there's 4 holes that mount it. Now they show mounting this this tank and this box on top of it before you install it, but I'm going to install it first because I think I'm probably going to paint these up a little bit. And they show mounting the speed control here and the switch here, which I just don't like the idea that it's going to be out in the open, so I'll probably make a plastic piece to cover that. I don't know what I'm going to do here. I'm going to see how the body fits on it. So I'm just going to install those later. There's no reason why they need to be installed now. There's easy access to the screws. So I'll go ahead and mount this, and then I'll take a look at these pieces here and see what I can do to make them look better. As I think about painting these, I'm going to go ahead and paint this tree here, which is the grille, some of the exhaust pieces, the inner fenders. I'm going to paint this one here, which are the rear fenders. So I'm going to paint all these with TS29. And I'm going to go ahead with this one and just paint it right while it's on the tree. That way the little parts don't blow around. Same with this. I'll just paint it right on the tree. And I won't paint that, but I'll paint those two. So I'm going to go ahead and paint those and let them dry. That way when I install these, they'll all be ready to go. As I look at this tank, I just kind of want to go through my thought process for figuring this out. So this tank mounts about right here, and the rear body hold down clip mounts here. Now it has a little extension right here for an antenna, which we don't need, so I'm going to saw that off and mount this down. So that means the rear of the body is like right in here. So part of this is going to be underneath the edge of the body, but not completely. And so there's also these brackets that mount here, something like this, for holding on the side wing. So I'm going to go ahead and mount these. Then I can put the side wing on, set the body plate on, kind of set the body in position and see what I've got left here for building my little extra box, and maybe a way to kind of cover up the servo a little bit. So we'll take a look at that. As I continue to prep these side panels, you can see I used the little decals they provide for the marker lights. And on this side, there's a molded in exhaust. So I'm going to paint this black around here, and then I'll come back and paint the exhaust silver, and I'll add the decals for this. You can see that I glued a piece of plastic over the switch hole as I continue to work in on getting the body in place. The body's drying right now, and I painted it, so I'll get to work on that in a little bit, but I'll finish prepping this side panel here. You can see I used a little tape to mark off what I don't want to paint, and then I'll just get this all black here, which I think will look a lot better. This little body mounting clip mounts on the inside of the panel and just hooks under there, and then these screws hold it on. You can see I still haven't decided exactly what to do with the tank on this side, and did mount the box on the other side. I'll show you here in a second. This is a cute little truck. It's really short. It's going to steer great. Okay, so there's the other side. You can see I painted the exhaust area and painted this silver. I'm just slowly working along on it. I still haven't, like I said, decided exactly what to do with this, but we'll get there. And then I mounted the inner fenders to the bottom of this deck plate, which is going to mount something like that. So actually, I probably just about a place where I could go ahead and mount this, and then I can start fitting on the body and figuring out what it's going to look like in here. On the body, you can see I painted the body in light gun metal. I did have to do a little bit of masking to paint these red, but other than that, the red parts didn't really require much masking. So I can start putting the body together. I think that looks pretty cool. So I think I'll go ahead and mount this down, and then I'll start working on the body. Working along on the back, I just mounted the pieces to the metal bracket for the tail lights. They have a metal bar that goes in between, and then one screw and one bolt holds this on either side. The lenses, since it was an older Tamiya kit, the lenses are just clear and you have to paint them. I used Tamiya clear red and clear amber to paint those, and I will glue those on when everything's done. So I'm going to go ahead and mount this. Then the fenders, rear fenders, mount up in here. This mounts here. There's also one bolt that goes through here into the fender, so I can go ahead and get those mounted. Then I can put the tires and wheels on it, or honing in on getting the chassis complete. I'm going to work on the body. So I grabbed a radio, and I've got a battery here to power the receiver. So I hooked up my steering and got it adjusted. Actually didn't need any adjustment, but it has full steering, including missing those pieces where I ground away, so it steers really sharp. And then I adjusted my shifting so it shifts good, and I can hook a battery to it here. So there's, and you can see the difference here. It's low gear, medium gear, high gear. I did have to do some adjustments on the shift points. You can see the shift points on channel 5 are 92% and 72% because the servo was actually traveling a little too far. So the way I do that is just flip it and adjust it so that it's not pulling the servo at all. And so now I've got my shift and my steering adjusted. I can go ahead and put the tires and wheels on it and go ahead and mount this cab base. So I'll get going on that. So this thing is cute as heck. I love it. It is just a short little awesome truck. It's, I know, going to be fun to drive. Closest thing I can think of is like a yard locomotive. This thing would whip in and out of places and around corners, and it's just looking really good. Okay, so the chassis is complete, and now it's time to assemble the body. You can see that I've got everything painted here. So I'm going to go ahead and start putting this together, and we'll see how that works. So what I've done here is I've just mounted the top cap, 4 screws. Nothing exciting. But I mounted these little wings because the wing here doesn't quite line up with my paint line on the top. And there's another wing that mounts here. So what I want to do is I want to extend this line, tape it off, and then paint the very bottoms of these with the same gunmetal as the rest of the body, so I have a nice straight line through here. I figured the best way to do that was to mount this down, and then I'll just bring a piece of tape across and mask it off. So that'll probably be, I use this 10mm Tamiya tape. I'll get a nice long piece, and I don't know how good you can see this, but what I'm going to do is do it straight on my body. And then carry that line onto my wing like that. So I'll go ahead and tape the other side, tape the back side, take these off, paint that little tiny area gray, and then come back and put them back on. So the exhaust, which I previously painted, I glued it together with this clear E6000 glue. There's a piece to glue here and a piece to glue here and a cover. And then I bolted it up and let it dry, and then mounted these wings over. You can see where I did the paint. So now I've got to mount these side wings, which just hold on with a couple of bolts back here. So I'll go ahead and do that, and then I can mount the top cap, and after that, the next things are the windshield, the side windows, and the tilt restrictor bar and the mirrors. So I'll go ahead and get all those things put in, and then I can mount the front end together. The mirrors, I have bolted them on. They bolt on with a typical strap, but I haven't glued the mirror part on yet, so I'll do that. And then the overhead visor I painted with TS29 semi-black, and that glues on, but that'll look like that. So that's coming together pretty good. Really not a lot to the body, pretty straightforward. So I'll go ahead and bolt those on. We'll see what it looks like. So I've got the windshield mounted, the top spoiler mounted, the rear spoilers mounted, the side windows and the mirrors mounted. I stuck a couple of the decals on, and the body tilt, I guess, limiting device, and the rear hold down. So pretty straightforward. You know, that stuff all just screwed on. Now on this body, there's a metal brace that mounts inside here, and then this mounts over the top, which then gives the body the ability to tilt. So this brace, and I already put some Loctite in the holes, just mounts in here. Get this mounted. Body literally took 20 minutes to mount everything on, so pretty straightforward. And then this just mounts through here, and that plate sandwiches the body in between. Okay, so that gives us our tilting body. Now that is just going to, let's see here, mount up here to this mount like this, and it's going to go like that. That looks pretty cool. I like this little truck. Okay, a couple more things to do on the body. One of them is to mount these. Now, they mount right here, and you've seen me do this before. Tamiya shows gluing this to the back side of the body, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually drill through here in two places and use these little self-tapping screws to hold those on. I like to be able to remove stuff like that later. And so I've got to put those on, and then I've got the seats and the dash will mount inside. I'll show that. And so the seats and the dash will mount inside, and then once that's done, the grille will mount to the front with a couple screws from the back. You can see I put the Volvo logo and the FH12 on there. And there's a couple little detail pieces, a couple handles, and a couple wipers that glue on. And that completes the body. And then we'll work on the front clip. So let me get these things mounted, and we'll come back and do the dash. So the dash, I got the decals on, sprayed some clear flat on it. Kind of nothing terribly exciting about the dash. And it's just held on with a couple screws here. Tucks up from here like this. There. The seat mounts over it like that. Get a little bit of Loctite on there. And one of those nuts with the flat washer. I'll tighten that from the front, but you can see the dash and the seat in there. It's actually a second seat on this side. The windows are really heavily tinted on this. I don't think you could see the seats at all without some kind of lighting inside here. Alright, so there's our seats. You can see I screwed on these side panels. So the final remaining thing here is to mount the grille with a couple screws from the back side. And then there's a couple grab handles that go across here and some wipers, which I will go ahead and glue in with micro crystal clear. And then I'll set this aside for those to dry, and I'll go back to the chassis and work on mounting the components there. Before I finish the body and mount it, I want to get some of the stuff mounted in here. So I've decided I'm going to just tape the receiver right here and the speed control right here. But in order to do that, I have to lengthen the battery wires on the speed control so they will reach down to the battery box. So I'm going to solder some new wires in there. The motor wires will reach just fine. And then I was looking at the front clip. There's this this chrome piece that just kind of slides in here. It's held in with a couple screws. Looks really nice. And I thought, you know, it might be just kind of fun. I wasn't going to put any sound or lights in this, but I'm just going to throw a few lights in it. So what I've got is an electronic switch and some 5mm high intensity LED bulbs. So I'm going to just put 4 bulbs in here, hook them to an electronic switch so I have switch operated headlights, just for fun. And so I'm gonna show how I do that too, because you know, you don't need to spend $1 million. This is what, I don't know, 13 bucks. These are like 5, and you know, then you got some pretty amazing headlights for really pretty inexpensive. So I am going to do that. So several little things going on. First off, I soldered a piece of wire into that speed control so it would reach the battery. I mounted these, and I took 4 high intensity 5mm bulbs, and I just stuck them in with hot glue. And you can see here that I glued all the positives together and the negatives together. My electronic switch here has got a plug, so I've got a matching JST plug. So I will just solder to that. Put some shrink tube over them. So I can just solder that on. Let's just do that real quick. And so I'll just shrink tube those, and then this will be ready to just plug in, and this will just plug into channel 6. That's channel 5. That's channel 6. And so that's all the wiring required. Those will just plug in and then the lights will work. And so I'll shrink these up, and then I will mount these items down. We're zooming in on it here. So I've been playing with this tank, trying to figure out what to do, and I finally realized there's 2 threaded holes right here in the frame on both sides. And so what I did was I took, I have some scrap pieces of this aluminum diamond plate, and I just drilled a couple holes in it that match those, bent it 90 degrees, and I'm going to mount it just like that with 2 screws, and it looks great actually. I'm going to make another one for this side, but it's got to be smaller because of the servo horn, so it's going to be a little bit narrower, but it'll really disguise this. Now I'm going to take this, it's got a protective film on it, which I'm going to peel off, and I am going to paint this with Tamiya semi-flat black, and I think that'll just look great in there. So there and there, and I'll get those on, and then I'm basically ready to install the body. So there's my little metal plates in. I had to relieve that one so that the steering servo would miss it, and that was easy to do, and they look fine. I plugged in my headlights, and I've got everything plugged in. You can see I've got the body mounted, so it just goes down like that. And the way I hooked this up, I put the lights on channel 6. They're nice and bright. Just kind of a nice little addition. My steering works good. This thing is short, so it has just a super turning radius. Really cool little truck. I think the paint turned out good. It certainly looks a lot better than that yellow they had it painted on the box art. I don't know why the globe liner looks so good yellow and this looks so bad yellow, but anyway, I think that's a much nicer paint job. You can see just a few little details. I did the stickers, I painted the exhaust, I painted the tail lights with the correct color. The fuel tank I painted mica silver, and I put some chrome straps on it. Just a few little details, and of course I think painting the transmission case was really good on this truck because it does stick out and you can see it. So let me move my mat and we'll get a final look at it. Well, there we go. The Tamiya Globetrotter 420 FH12, an older kit, but really cute. Super tight steering, single rear axle. It's the least expensive kit in Tamiya's semi-truck line right now. I don't know why it's not more popular other than the horrible box art paint scheme. I think this one looks a lot better. And yeah, this is basically completely stock except for a couple little additions with the diamond plate and the remote operated high intensity headlights, so which look really good. Fun build, super easy to build, and I think it turned out great. Looks wonderful. So there you go. As always, thanks for watching. Give me a thumbs up. Please subscribe to the channel, and we'll see you next time.